The room was heavy with the scent of lilies and the quiet murmurs of loved ones mourning the loss of a beloved grandmother. Tears flowed freely as the eulogy began, a tribute to a woman who had been the cornerstone of her family. But just as the pastor's voice echoed through the somber chapel, a young girl's voice broke through the silence, trembling yet firm. "Wait, there's something everyone needs to know." Gasps rippled through the crowd as all eyes turned to the girl standing near the back of the room. Her father, seated in the front row, looked stunned. The tension was palpable, and whispers quickly turned to shocked murmurs. No one could have anticipated what came next. The girl took a deep breath, revealing a truth so startling, it left the room in stunned silence. Her father, his face turning pale, reached for his phone and dialed 911. What could possibly drive a grieving daughter to disrupt her grandmother's funeral with such urgency? And why did it force her father to take such a drastic step? Stay tuned as this heart-stopping story unfolds, revealing family secrets and unexpected twists that no one saw coming. The room felt frozen in time as everyone tried to process what the girl had just said. Her name was Lily, a quiet teenager who had always been seen as polite and reserved. No one had expected her to speak up, let alone disrupt her own grandmother's funeral. The confusion on her father's face quickly turned to unease, his hands trembling slightly as he held his phone. "Lily," he called out, his voice sharp but filled with an edge of fear. "What are you doing?" Lily's eyes brimmed with tears, but her resolve didn't waver. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice cracking, "but I can't keep this a secret anymore. Grandma deserved better. She deserved the truth." A stunned silence fell over the room again. People exchanged nervous glances, whispering among themselves, unsure of what to expect. Some relatives tried to shush her, urging her to sit down, but Lily shook her head. Her hands clenched into fists at her sides, as if holding on to courage she wasn't sure she had. Her father's face turned ashen as he stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Don't do this, Lily. Not here. Not now." But it was too late. The truth she was about to reveal would change everything. Lily's voice trembled, but she forced herself to speak. "Dad, you've been lying to everyone. To me. To Grandma. She knew something was wrong before she passed, didn't she?" Her words cut through the room like shards of glass, leaving everyone stunned. Faces turned to Lily's father, who now looked like he was carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders. He opened his mouth to respond but couldn't find the words. From the corner, Aunt Margie gasped. "Lying? What's she talking about, Mark?" she demanded, her gaze shifting between Lily and her brother. The uneasy silence was filled with murmurs from the crowd, tension building like a storm about to break. Lily pointed at her father, tears streaming down her face. "She didn't just pass away peacefully, did she? You knew something was wrong, and you didn't do anything. You didn't tell anyone." Mark's face turned beet red as his hands shook. "Enough," he snapped, his voice cracking. "This is not the time or place for your accusations." But his voice betrayed him. It lacked conviction. From the back of the room, someone muttered, "What does she mean? What is he hiding?" The questions hung in the air, and the tension only grew as all eyes remained locked on Lily and her father. Lily's words echoed in the hushed room, growing heavier with each passing second. Mark took a step toward his daughter, his voice low and urgent. "You don't understand what you're saying," he hissed, trying to keep control. "We'll talk about this later. Sit down." But Lily stood her ground. "No, Dad. We're talking about it now. Grandma knew the truth, and you tried to cover it up. She told me the night before she passed. She was scared, and I didn't know what to do. I didn't think it would end like this." Her voice cracked, and she wiped away tears with shaking hands. The crowd grew restless, murmurs turning into audible whispers as everyone strained to piece together the fragmented accusations. Aunt Margie was the first to break the tension, standing abruptly. "Mark, what's going on? What's she talking about? What did you hide from us?" Mark's jaw tightened as his eyes darted around the room. "This is ridiculous," he muttered, more to himself than anyone else. But his trembling hands betrayed him. Before anyone could respond, the distant wail of sirens grew louder, cutting through the tension like a blade. Gasps spread across the room as people began to realize the seriousness of what was unfolding. Lily stood frozen, her heart pounding as the sound grew closer. What had she set in motion? What would happen when the truth finally came out? The sirens drew closer, their piercing wails sending ripples of unease through the already tense room. Mark's face was pale now, beads of sweat forming on his forehead. He opened his mouth to speak, but was cut off by Lily's trembling voice. "Grandma wasn't just scared that night," she said, her words like a dagger cutting through the silence. "She told me she had proof. Proof that you—" "Stop," Mark roared, his voice cracking as he took a step toward her. But it was too late. The funeral doors burst open, and 2 officers entered, their expressions grim. Everyone turned in shock, murmurs spreading like wildfire. Mark staggered back, his face a mask of fear and fury. The air in the room felt electric, every eye shifting between Mark, Lily, and the officers. But just as Mark started to protest, a voice from the back of the room cut through the tension. "I know what this is about," Aunt Margie said, stepping forward. Her tone was sharp, and her eyes were locked on Mark. And it's time everyone else knew, too. Lily turned toward her aunt, stunned. "You knew," she whispered. Margie nodded, her jaw tight. "I should have said something sooner, but I was scared." "Mark, you can't hide it anymore." The crowd erupted in whispers, and Mark's composure crumpled as the walls of his secrets began to close in. The officers stepped closer, and the truth seemed on the brink of exploding into the open. Mark's shoulders sagged as the weight of the moment bore down on him. His eyes darted to Margie, then to Lily, his voice shaking as he tried to regain control. "This isn't the place for this," he muttered. "You're blowing things out of proportion." Margie's expression hardened. "Enough, Mark. You've been hiding this for years, and it ends today." She turned to the officers, her voice resolute. "He forged documents, medical records, legal papers, to cover up the fact that Grandma was being exploited. He drained her accounts, lied to all of us, and left her helpless. I found some of the records weeks ago, but I was too afraid to say anything." Gasps rippled through the room. Lily stared at her father in disbelief. "Is that true? Dad, is it true?" she asked, her voice breaking. Mark's silence was deafening, his head hanging low. The officers stepped forward, one of them addressing Margie. "Do you have these documents now?" But before she could answer, a quiet voice interrupted from the front row. "You're wrong," came a frail, trembling voice. Everyone turned in shock as an elderly woman stood with difficulty, clutching a cane. It was Grandma's best friend, Mrs. Delaney. Mark isn't the only one hiding something. The room froze as Mrs. Delaney revealed a folded letter from her purse. "Before she passed, your grandmother asked me to keep this safe. She wanted you all to know the truth about everything." The officers took the letter as Lily's heart pounded in her chest. What could it say? As the officer unfolded the paper, his face darkened. "This changes everything," he said grimly. Mark's head shot up, his panic turning into confusion. "What is that? What's in the letter?" he demanded. But the officer only said, "We need to take this to the station. There's more to investigate than we thought." As Mark was escorted out, Lily's mind raced. Her grandmother's final words had uncovered more than anyone anticipated, and the truth was only just beginning to surface. The room slowly emptied as the officers led Mark away, his protests fading into the distance. Lily sat frozen in her seat, her emotions a whirlwind of shock and sadness. Aunt Margie placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. "You were brave today, Lily," she said softly. "Grandma would be proud of you for standing up for what's right." Later that evening, surrounded by close family, Lily finally read the letter Mrs. Delaney had handed over to the police. It was a heartfelt note from her grandmother, explaining everything. She had discovered Mark's actions months ago, but had chosen to confront him privately, hoping he would change. When it became clear he wouldn't, she confided in Mrs. Delaney, asking her to protect the truth if anything ever happened. Tears streamed down Lily's face as she finished reading. The letter also included a message just for her. Asterisk Lily, my dearest, never stop seeking the truth, even when it's hard. Our family will heal, but it starts with honesty. Be strong. Asterisk. As the weeks passed, the truth brought the family closer. Mark faced the consequences of his actions, and the remaining family members vowed to honor Grandma's memory with openness and love. Though it was a painful journey, Lily knew her courage had made all the difference.